Good morning. Welcome to the MTA meeting. Our first order of business is public speakers. Do we have any public speakers?
Mr. Chairman, we have 12 public speakers who have registered to speak.
Great. Thank you. First.
Our first speaker is William Henderson. We have a busy agenda today. We'll ask you to keep to 2 minutes, please. All the speakers. 2.
Good morning. The PCAC and its constituents councils, Long Island Railroad Commuter Council, Metro North Railroad Commuter Council, New York City Transit Riders Council cannot support this budget and proposed fare increases contained in it. We believe that the financial path that the MTA is traveling is not sustainable. The proposed financial plan relies too heavily on riders, not enough on others who benefit from the MTA system, without which our region could not function. The steady series of fare increases bearing no relationship to inflation or increases in income threatens to shift the burden of supporting the system ever more greatly onto riders, who already pay a higher proportion of operating costs than riders in any other part of the nation. Beyond the immediate impact on the rider, we're concerned with the long-term sustainability of funding that supports the MTA. Even discounting the impacts of Sandy and need to prepare for future storms, this system has huge future capital investment needs with no obvious means to pay for them. Adding to the MTA's $32 billion debt, with annual debt service approaching $2.8 billion by 2016, is not a viable option. There must be a wide-ranging discussion among all stakeholders, including riders, MTA, and governmental funding partners. We must have stable and reliable funding that can grow to meet financial needs. We must ensure that riders who have met their obligations appropriately share financial responsibility for the MTA with all those who benefit from the system. And we must wean the capital program from extreme reliance on fare-backed bonds, which are the gift that keeps on giving as they add 30 years of debt service to the operating budget. We recognize that the board has few immediate options. You're required to produce and approve a self-sustaining budget. And given these constraints, the choices reflected in Chairman Loda's recommendations strike an appropriate balance between single-fare purchasers, per-ride MetroCard buyers, and time-based MetroCard users. And they impose similar increases on commuter rail riders. But these constraints are what makes the path that we are on unacceptable, and all of us, including the members of this board, must strive to change course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is David Kupferberg. He'll be followed by Myriad Awa, and then Violetta Maya. David Kupferberg.
Chief Financial Officer Robert Foran and Project Manager William Wheeler have some nerve suggesting this sham of a fare proposal before objectively looking at the various alternatives the public has to offer. Makes me wonder who they really serve. Again, I blame former Governor George Pataki and our currently elected state and local officials for the mess the MTA is in. MTA Board, you must force the state of New York to 1, assume MTA's debt service, except those passed via the referendum. 2, ban the MTA from issuing more debt service, except those passed via the referendum. And 3, restore all funding, capital and operating, to at least 1990 level, pre-1990 levels. I think this 3-point proposal, first suggested during the last fare adjustment, i.e. when Jay Walder was chairman and CEO, should be approved before you even think of raising the fares. If you can't do this, then maybe we should change the makeup of the MTA board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Myriad Adwat. And then Violetta Maya.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present before you today. My name is Murad Awada, and I'm the Environmental Justice Organizer at Uprose. I'm delivering this testimony on behalf of the Restore the B37 Coalition and our Uprose members. Uprose was founded in 1966. It's the oldest Brooklyn Latino-based community organization. We aim to ensure and heighten community awareness and involvement, develop participatory community planning practices, and promote sustainable development with justice and government accountability. Sunset Park is home is a low-income community of color which is riddled with environmental burdens. It's home to the Gowanus Expressway. We have several power plants, waste transfer stations for our prison, brownfields, recycling facility, and a lack of open space. Our community has asthma, upper respiratory diseases, and cancer. Despite all the health disparities in a densely populated community of color, we come before you today as a member of the Restore the B37 Coalition. Our coalition consists of community residents, elders, youth, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and elected officials. In 2009, the MTA promised no service cuts when they raised the fares, but they still went through with the cuts. In 2010, we lost the B37 bus line and had to pay more for less service. Senior citizens with disabilities, youth, low-income workers are hit the hardest by fare hikes and service cuts. The B37 was the only bus line in the neighborhood that served in close proximity to schools, work, places of worship, after-school programs, daycare centers, health facilities, and senior centers. The elimination of the bus adversely impacted the elderly, disabled, families, and people with chronic illnesses. We understand the financial issues the MTA is facing and the need for more revenue to be generated. Since the MTA is raising the fare, we are demanding that the B37 bus line be restored, the station booths and station agents be restored in the southbound stations for the N and R line, elevators be installed along the N and R line, and station agents who were removed from the southbound side of the NR lines in our neighborhood in 2010, we found the correlation between the lack of station booths and a rise in assaults. As a result of these bus and subway reductions and failure to the MTA to install elevators, the people in the neighborhood have severely been inconvenienced. We depend on our buses, and the NR lines are...
Could you wrap up, please, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Are the only primary sources of transportation to carry our daily activities, including traveling to work and school. Our ability to get on the bus is a health issue, an economic issue, and an educational access issue, and a justice issue. We have collected several hundred signatures for our bus line and for the service improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Assemblymember Nicole Maliatakis.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see all of you.
Good morning, Nicole.
I'm Assemblywoman Nicole Maliatakis. I represent Staten Island and Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. As such, the proposal before you for the Verrazano Bridge is something of great interest to me. I certainly appreciate your efforts made to keep a resident discount for Staten Island, and I do feel that it's needed to be pointed out that the negative impact that a $15 toll would have on our local economy and the quality of life of my constituents. We're talking here about, the small business owner who has commercial vehicles that are not eligible for a resident discount, making it more difficult to attract businesses to come to Staten Island and be based there. Yeah. We're talking about the guy who lives in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, who works in Woodbridge, New Jersey, and has to now pay $28 toll, cash, or $21 with Easy Pass, each day just to get to work. And we're talking about the restaurants, the stores, the small businesses, the cultural institutions on Staten Island that can't attract people off Staten Island because no one wants to pay $15 to get there. So despite the amount of money that Staten Island puts into the system with the Verrazano Bridge toll, we still lack the transportation options that the other four boroughs have, making it difficult because, we really do rely on our vehicles in the borough. Now, I believe that this is a result of years of unsustainable capital plans that were your predecessors and your predecessors' predecessors that have led to a $40 billion debt that the MTA now faces. So as we go into the 2015 capital plan, I want to urge you to, let's please be more, conservative with the budget and only focus on the projects that we really need because we can't continue to kick the can down the road. Last year, we were very successful in waiving the fees that the MTA paid the state for issuing bonds. And I thank Alan Capelli, who is the board member from Staten Island, for working with me to advocate for that. And we saved the agency $50 million last year alone. And so I'll be introducing legislation when we go to Albany next month to waive that permanently. That should be permanently eliminated. There's no reason why the state should be charging a state agency a fee or what I would call a tax to borrow money. Also, I'd like to see anything that is, fines or summonses issued by MTA personnel. That money should be going back to the MTA. It should not be going to the City General Fund, and I want to work with you on that. But I'm asking you to also work with me in looking at a more equitable regional plan, because we can't keep going to the people of Staten Island, South Brooklyn, and increasing that particular toll. We need to have a more equitable plan so that way the burden of the MTA's fiscal woes does not unfairly fall on the shoulders of Staten Island and Brooklyn residents. And so I would ask you to please work with me. I would like to work with you as we go into the next legislative session to see how the state can help, and I will be an advocate to work alongside you to make sure we don't keep hitting the same commuters over the head. And so please, I ask you, I would urge you to vote no on today's plan, and let's go back to the drawing board and try to come up with a more equitable and fair solution. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Violeta Maya, then Mr. X, then Maria Escalera.
Good morning. My name is Violeta Maya. I live in Sunset Park below 3rd Avenue, and I am with the B37 Bus Coalition. I'm here to ask you that we are frustrated and tired with the MTA's lack of concern for our community. The services that are completely unjust to the people of our neighborhood. As tax-paying citizens, we expect that the services due to us be established to meet our needs. I am handicapped. I also suffer from lymphedema. I can't carry heavy stuff, and I have no ways to get to Fulton Street. I have no way to get to the subways because we have no elevators. And I am stuck, and I'm talking about not just myself, but I'm talking about other people who are just in the same position that I'm in. I'm asking you, please, to restore the services that were taken away from us, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. X.
Joe, I have a Christmas present for you. By the way, congratulations, you're running for mayor. I gave you a document in November, and that was your Thanksgiving Day present. This is your Christmas present. Read these documents carefully, and then you'll understand why I'm not supporting you for mayor. Okay, there's no way I'm supporting you when you mishandle public hearings. I understand Hurricane Sandy damaged homes throughout this county, which I consider New York City County. But that doesn't explain your behavior towards us. You should have postponed all of them. You only postponed the Staten Island public hearing. You were supposed to hold a public hearing in Farmingdale. You held it in Melville. You were supposed to hold a public hearing in Yonkers. You held it in White Plains. You made everything confusing. I got the information from the website because I constantly log on to it. Remember, everyone doesn't have a computer access. Everyone doesn't have internet access. I'm one of the few people that has it. I'm one of the few people that has time to log into your website. Save the PDF pages, print them non-PDF pages. Most people don't have that leisure time like I might do. You should be considerate to everyone, and so far I haven't seen that. You should have postponed all the public hearings, and as I said in November, it's good that you advertise them on the flyer, which was available at 3 Stone Street. What was bad is they weren't on your website for at least 2 weeks. When I registered to speak, I was trying to use the register speaking form, but didn't know before time. You have to tell us what's happening before time, not after. And this is what I've seen over the years. You're not telling us what's happening before time. You're keeping us uninformed, misinformed, but you want us to help you run for mayor.
Can you
I
wrap
don't
up,
think
please?
so.
Thank you. Maria Escalera, and then Marty Goodman, and then Tony Murphy.
Hi, good morning. My name is Maria Escalera. I'm the Advocacy Coordinator at Lutheran Family Health Center in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And I'm here to talk to you about the Beast 37 bus that we lost in 2010. I have seen the impact that it has on our patients coming to our facility. We serve over 90,000 patients, seniors, disabled, children, and they've been impacted, as well as the employees that come to work there. And I'm asking that the MTA please restore our B37 bus, and also to restore the station booth and station agent at the southbound station on the N and R lines, and the elevators to be restored along the N and R lines. I am also a member of the Restore the B37 Bus Coalition, and please, we implore you to please restore our bus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marty Goodman?
Hello, I'm Marty Goodman, a retired transit worker and on the executive board of the union for 9 years. I speak today in opposition to all fare hikes and for a contract raise for transit workers without givebacks. I'm for restoring station agents and rejecting this budget. The MTA pays $2 billion a year in debt to banks and other Wall Street crooks. The state provides only 40% of MTA income, the least in the country. But most of the funding comes from the fare box, mainly by working people. Fare box money is shipped directly to Wall Street, mostly as tax-free income. The MTA is now on the hook to Wall Street for $32 billion. The recent multi-billion-dollar fines for HSBC and UBS stock frauds and the LIBOR scandal shows that Wall Street is nothing but a sewer of corruption. Let's not forget that Bernie Madoff, the former head of NASDAQ, was a huge force on Wall Street. The recent decision of the MTA to sell $5 billion in MTA bonds to pay for Sandy repairs and old debt was highly successful. Wall Street had to be turned away. The recent bond issue will add $62 million in debt on a yearly basis, paid by the strap hangers. Tax-free bonds are a great way for the 1% loafers to hide from the economic crisis that they themselves have caused. And I would also like, by the way, to learn more about the $75 million that was borrowed, I believe, from the pension fund. The true obscenity is that the MTA refuses to bargain down debt. The MTA believes banks are holy. In Europe, the crisis has forced governments like Greece, Spain, and Italy to reduce payments to banks or face a revolution. The European Union okayed debt reduction to holders of Greek bonds and debt payments. In contrast, the MTA refuses to renegotiate the multi-million-dollar swap payment ripoff to the banks. Working people, writers, should have no faith in the numbers provided by the MTA. We owe the banks nothing. A last word for you, Mr. Loda. If you're a Republican candidate, will you stick to the doctrine of no new taxes? What else is a fare hike but a new tax on working people?
Please wrap up, Mr. Goodman.
I say cancel the debt now, no to all fare hikes, a raise for transit workers without concessions, make the rich pay. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Murphy, to be followed by Paul Piazza.
So all the media will be about the MTA head running for mayor. Mr. Lodo, I don't know what kind of record you think what your record has to recommend you for mayor. You're presiding over the fourth fare hike in 4 years. These are somewhat small fare hikes when they happen, but they happen so often now that you turn around after a few years and it's a significant fare hike in the midst of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. You're really just, am I bothering you? Are you? Yeah, sorry, we'd like you to pay attention to what we're saying. Sir, you're turning people into ATM machines on behalf of the banks. That's what you're doing. And to make matters worse, now you're helping Pamela Geller put up new racist ads in the subway. Ads that attack the Muslim ridership directly. So let's what are you going to say that you're running for mayor on? I helped continually raise the fare on people. I helped make it harder for people with disabilities to use the subway. I promoted war and racism, used the MTA to help promote war and racism. We know that you got a lot of credit for rehabilitating the transit system, and we saw you on TV a lot. You were definitely in front of the cameras, but that was not you. That was the transit workers who you are saying do not deserve a raise for 3 years. So it was the transit workers who worked 14-hour shifts, and that deserves some applause too. It was the transit workers who slept on cots away from their families and did the hard, dirty, dangerous work of reviving the transit system after Hurricane Sandy, as they always do. The transit workers always do the hard, dangerous, dirty work. The transit workers are the ones who expended their blood and sweat making this system run. And I think I saw Joseph Lota break a sweat chasing the TV cameras after Hurricane Sandy. Thank you.
Paul Piazza, be followed by Veronica Vanderpool, Gene Rushinoff, and Matt Shakin, who I believe are going to appear together. No, I have 3 more after that.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Loda. Good morning, MTA Board. It sure is a lot of press here. Make me nervous. I'm a transit worker. The fare hike, I say no. It's not fair to people. It's not fair to disabled people like that. It's not fair to the elderly. It's not fair to anybody, really. And if you think of it, you're raising fares when you cut service. And you still have service cuts, although you did restore some of them. There are a ton of token booths that are still empty. Well, they're not empty. They were taken out of the ground. They were pulled out of the ground because I was told by an MTA manager that you're getting so many complaints about them being closed and still up that you guys doubled time pulling them out so you wouldn't get any more complaint calls. You can't fool the citizens in New York. Crime is going up in the subway. Arrests are going down. It's not a good thing. We told you. Well, we didn't tell you, Mr. Lodo, but we told Jay Walder that when you got rid of the token booths, crime would go up, and that has happened. The people of New York are not being served. There's been a lot of talk about Hurricane Sandy. I know Tony Murphy, who was just up here, talked about it. But I have to say I work for Stations Department, which handles station agents, cleaners, collecting agents, and warehouse men. And there was no plan. And whatever plan there was quickly changed by superintendents out in the field. In fact, you had the people that I represent come to holding stations, to come to train stations while the storm was going on. You ordered them to come to work to sit there and do nothing, with the threat of not being paid if they didn't do that. Ridiculous. You also made them give up their saved days and vacation days to replace those days if they couldn't make it in. So if I lived in Staten Island and the bridge was closed or the ferry wasn't running, I had to use one of my vacation days to get paid and feed my family. It's not right. Pay all the transit workers, give them back their days, reopen the booths, and no fare increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Veronica Vanderpool, Gene Rushinoff, and Matt Shakin. And then John Minerva, I believe it is, or Mineka.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, MTA board members and staff and the public. I'm Gene Rushinoff with the Strap Hangers campaign, and with me this morning is Veronica Vanderpool from the Tri-State Transportation campaign. And we're so pleased that so many cameras have turned out to cover our statement to you about your finances. So we're going to read our statement. Today, the MTA votes to raise subway, bus, and commuter rail fares. It is also voting on its financial plan for the next 4 years. The agency already faced major financial challenges before Superstorm Sandy hit. These have significantly increased in the devastating wake of the storm. Our groups share the view expressed by MTA Chairman Joe Lota that under any financial plan, new aid from Albany will be needed in the coming years. We appreciate the MTA is not planning any service cuts for the coming year and is in fact restoring $30 million worth of service. and the agency also deserves credit for promoting additional cost-cutting savings. And just before I turn it over to Veronica, the statement is from Strap Hangers Campaign, Tri-State Transportation Campaign, Transportation Alternatives, and the New York State Transportation Equity Alliance.
But our groups have two major concerns about the MTA's four-year financial plan. First, it assumes another fare increase, yielding 7.5% more revenue in 2015, continuing a trend of every two-year fare hikes that are greater than the rate of inflation. We think these biennial fare hikes have led to the riding public paying more than their fair share, and that it will pose real hardship on many of your riders. Second, the four-year plan will require external borrowing, increasing annual debt service. The MTA estimates it has $4.75 billion in infrastructure damage. The federal government and insurance will pay for most of that. However, some $950 million of infrastructure damage may need to be covered by the MTA. That will come to $66 million a year in additional debt payments for decades to come. Funding these needs by MTA bonds will increase pressure on fares through increased debt service, and it sets a troubling precedent for the funding of the next five-year capital program starting in 2015. Earlier this year, the MTA borrowed $7 billion to help pay for the last 2 years, 2013 and 2014, of its current construction program. The agency already spends $2 billion a year out of its $13 billion annual operating budget to pay off its existing $32 billion in debt. Debt service is projected to go up to $3 billion in future years. Superstorm Sandy showed us how much the subways, buses, and commuter rail mean to the life of New York. In the years to come, Governor Cuomo and state legislators must find sustainable revenue sources that take New York's transit network off life support and give riders the safe, reliable, and affordable transit they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John Minecca and Christine Williams.
My name is John Meinecke. I am a representative of the Labor Outreach Committee of Occupy Wall Street. I'm here to complain about the generous support that the Transit Authority gives to the New York City banks. Under the terms of these interest rate swaps, the Transit Authority pays out millions of dollars every year to the New York City banks with no services in return. In 2011, the MTA paid out $117 million under the terms of these debt swap agreements. And for the future, these agreements go on for 5, 10, 15 years, and the total that's scheduled to be paid out in the future is $1,274,000,000 and some change. It's quite a bit of change. So before the MTA considers raising the fare, they should renegotiate these agreements with the banks, where the MTA is subsidizing institutions which are doing very well financially.
Thank you. Christine Williams, and then finally Brody Enoch.
A lot of press here, wow. Hello, hello, hello. Oh. The fact that we're talking about fare hikes in the midst of one of the most devastating disasters the city has ever seen is actually disgusting. It's disgusting that we're even talking about this while houses are wiped off the face of the map. Kids can't even go to school. I mean, you're talking about raising the fare now in the midst of Sandy recovery. It's absolutely disgusting. I also want to bring up, while everybody's talking about base fare going up 25 cents, the unlimited's going up $1, $4 or $5, whatever, we cannot forget about the dollar surcharge on the new card. A made-up fee just made up out of the, four corners of the world. Let's just hit them with a fee that we just made this up last night. $1 for a new card. That is disgusting. I don't even know who thought of that. I mean, you have people who are unemployed trying to get a single ride, and their card malfunctions, because guess what, guys? Those cards don't work. You put your money on these cards, they bend up, they're dysfunctional, they don't work. You need a new card, you're going to charge them $1? For real? Does it take $1 to make that card? Somebody's getting rich off this. Somebody's making money off this. It's disgusting that we're even talking about this. That's all I have to say. It's disgusting.
Thank you. I apologize to Matt Shotkin. I overlooked him on the list. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Chairman. I know that you guys have been hearing an earful about the fare hikes this morning, so I'm not going to talk about that. Why do you need to raise the base and other fares again? It's just too expensive with the contract for the Nissan MV2000 now having been rejected. The disability community has to keep fighting to get a new manufacturer for the taxi of tomorrow. So far, we don't know what the next step is in this process. It still has to be figured out. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Brody Enoch.
Good morning, everyone, and I don't think anyone has said it, but happy holidays to everybody. You're welcome. All right, I got a response. That's a record. That's cool. My name is Brody Enoch. I'm with Transportation Alternatives, and over the last couple of years, we've been holding these transit town hall forums throughout the city, bringing elected officials together with community leaders and community residents and transit riders, and talking about what's been going on in the community, what the community needs in terms of better transit, and some solutions. One of the things that we have not done, which is kind of crazy, is we have not been MTA bashing. We look at it differently, and these town hall forums have produced some interesting results. We've been able to work with people out in Brooklyn, riders out in Brooklyn, to get the B48 restored. We've been able to work with people in Sheepshead Bay to get the B4 restored. We've worked with commuters and riders in Co-op City, riders in the South Bronx, Jamaica, Queens, Flushing, Queens, East Elmhurst, all throughout the city, just simply to work together on solutions to improve public transit. What's happening right now is the fare hike, and there's a lot of talk going on about this economic fiscal cliff that we're reaching throughout the nation. But in reality, there's been a transit funding fiscal cliff for quite a long time, and we're the ones that are being made to pay for that fiscal cliff, for the shortcomings of funding. I'm not here today to bash what you great folks do. Your jobs are hard enough. What I'm here today is to demand that the state and the city invest more in public transit, that this is not a problem of misappropriation, but there's just not enough funding to do what needs to be done in public transit. Once again, I wish all of you a happy holiday. Chairman, whatever your next move is, good luck, and everyone have a great holiday, and take care.
That concludes the public comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone, again, and welcome to our December meeting. Before we start, I'd like to begin today with a moment of silence for the victims of Newtown, Connecticut, which, as you all know, is the site of an unimaginable tragedy. Thank you. I again want to express my gratitude for the extraordinary work that I continue to see from the entire MTA workforce after Superstorm Sandy, which, as you know, was the worst natural disaster to hit our system. I said something similar at last month's meeting, but I want to repeat it again today because our employees deserve it. They have been working night and day to get the system back on behalf of all New Yorkers. Today, 2 months after our network was brought to its knees, nearly all of our transit system is up and running, and our riders have come back. 2 days from now, we expect to reopen the Montague Street Tunnel, a critically important connection between Brooklyn and Manhattan on the R line, so that we can then connect and have a one-seat ride from Bay Ridge into Manhattan. While that's a huge milestone, I want to be clear about something. We have a long way to go to get back to normal. The South Ferry, Whitehall Station, and our operations, our complete and total operations in the Rockaways, are both long-term rehabilitation and reconstruction projects. And while most of our customers are seeing good service, our workers are seeing another reality. They're seeing an extremely fragile system that, while safe, is extremely and continues to be vulnerable. We have a $5 billion need for immediate repairs just to get us back to where we were the day before the storm. And now, what we know is important as well is what we need is the money to protect our system from future flooding, a project that will cost billions and billions of dollars more. As Congress moves forward with disaster relief package, it's critical that this legislation include the necessary funding and the flexibility to meet the needs of the states of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And as I've said before, our region represents 11% of the entire nation's gross domestic product. And what happens when the MTA shuts down? A significant portion of the United States economy shuts down. This can't be just viewed as a local need. This is a national need. And as always, my goal is to ensure that our transit, our bridge, and our tunnel network continues to get the respect and the resources it deserves. Thank you. First item of business is approval of the minutes of last month's meeting. They've been distributed to all members. Are there any corrections or omissions? If they've been moved and seconded, all in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are sent. Now we consider the fare and toll changes that are an essential part of the MTA's financial plan. The recommended changes are the result of many months of planning, 8 public hearings, 4 video sessions, and a review of written documents from members of the public. The recommended actions, I believe, strike a balance between the competing goals and will raise the additional $450 million in annualized revenue that we need in our financial plan. First, we will take up the fare increases, which we will then consider the toll increases. You have before you a staff summary and resolution pertaining to the fare increases and the terms of sale as applicable to the MTA, to the New York City Transit Authority, to MAPSTOA, SOTOA, MTA Bus, Metro North Commuter Railroad Company, and the Long Island Railroad, all as set out in the resolution and the associated attachment. As stated in the staff summary, implementation of the increases is planned for March 1st, 2013. I move the adoption of this resolution. May I have a second? Second. And we'll open it up for discussion. Any discussion? Andrew?
In a perfect world, we wouldn't be going through these exercises every other year. We would be getting the financial support from the city and the state and the federal government so that our riders would not be paying the largest percentage of the cost of their ride of any transit system in the country, which is kind of ironic considering we have something like 75% of all the transit riders in the country. Yet, for some reason, our state, our city, and the federal government doesn't see fit to subsidize those riders the same way that Massachusetts, Illinois, Florida, California subsidizes their riders. Having said that, and having been to the fare briefings, I always thought that the best of a bad lot was going to be a hybrid proposal, not one of the ones that we've seen, but combinations of the various proposals, which I like to call 1C, for lack of a better term. The proposal before us now is pretty much 1C with an actual added benefit, thanks to the chairman, which is you get the buy-in on the bonus card at a lower rate than before. You get it for as little as 1 round trip, which effectively adds 12.5 cents each way to a round trip ticket, or MetroCard, which does ease the burden on our less affluent riders. This proposal does keep the bonus, which some of the proposals did not. It also takes it easy on the MTA's most frequent customers, those who buy the bonus and weekly and monthly MetroCard, and keeps those rates of increases lower than some of the previous proposals. So for that, I think what you have before you is the best of a not-so-great situation. However, if you take these increases to their logical conclusion, every other year, the same rate of increase, at some point, and for some it's already been reached, the transit system becomes unaffordable. When it becomes cheaper for a family of 4 from Hicksville or Tuckahoe to drive in, pay Manhattan's unbelievable parking rates, Manhattan's unbelievable parking surcharge for those who aren't Manhattanites, then we've got a problem. This problem cries out for some innovative thinking. It certainly cries out for new sources of income for the MTA, some innovative ticket types for families traveling together. I mean, if you figure out what it costs a family of 4 to come in, and then you have to assume that their ultimate destination might not have been Penn Station or Grand Central, that they're going to take a subway or a bus after that, it really becomes an unaffordable proposition for many middle-class families. So I understand what has to be done here today. It's not a great situation, but without state, city, and federal assistance, the MTA has to have a balanced budget. This is probably the best of the worst, of the lot. And I just hope that something happens soon. And many of the commissioners here are trying to get another look at additional funding sources for the MTA, whether that's congestion pricing, tolls on free bridges, a surcharge on the gas tax, a vehicle registration fee. But something has to happen before we price this gem of a system out of the reach of most New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
In the interest of time, I'll adopt much of what Andrew has stated as my own. I would just like to say that once again, we went through a process where we held public hearings, and I warned reporters in the beginning of the process that, when they thought that X was done, and I said, we're going to go and we're going to listen and we're going to deliberate and discuss amongst ourselves and come up with something that's fair and balanced. And while no one likes to do increases, I think that this reflects a process by which we did listen to the public and try to share the burdens as fairly as possible. And I commend the chairman and my colleagues on the board for their effort in doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mitch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is another sad day. We've been here many times, for those of us who have been here many times, but unfortunately, after looking at everything, it's the only option we have. This current fare increase proposal was actually proposed not in 2012, but in 2009, when the state legislature and the governor at that point made an arrangement on MTA financing. And as part of that arrangement, they indicated they wanted the MTA to increase fares in 2011, 2013, and another one coming in 2015. So we've had 3 years to look at not only the current MTA financing package, but the financing package going forward. But unfortunately, the stakeholders, and that includes us to some degree, have not been able to come up with a new sustainable financing mechanism. And so we are in 2013 exactly where we thought we would be in 2009. The date has now come without any other options enacted by anyone who has the authority to do so. No one else has taken any action, which leaves this board with no other option to reach a balanced budget. I agree completely and have always said so for the last 8 years. We must continue to examine all aspects of MTA financing again and again and again, because 2015 is right around the corner, and we will be in the same place doing the same thing unless we do something different with everybody else who can actually do something different. I also believe, and I've had this conversation with the chairman, we must examine other ways to look at the commuter rail fares. We can no longer just continue to put a percentage on a percentage on a percentage. We must look at other more innovative ways in which the commuter rails can pay what they have to pay and the commuters can pay their fair share of what it is. We're making a small change in this package to do part of that, but we need to do a lot more than that. In the end, at this moment in time, after 3 years of talking about it and no action by anyone else, this board is left with only one option to create a balanced budget. It's an unfortunate situation. It's not one that I'm sure all of us around the table want to do, but under our fiduciary responsibility to this system and to the employees of this system, we have only one option. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else? Yes. Ira?
I'm going to adopt, by reference, Commissioners Albert, Commissioners Pally, Commissioner Capelli's comments to make mine shorter, because of course that's especially Commissioner Albert. Just some numbers to attach to this. In 2008, the monthly Metrocard was $81. It's now $112. It will be $112. That's a 38% increase. Inflation is far behind that. Commuter rail fares, we calculated 21.4%. Inflation is nowhere near that. Real wages don't increase this amount. We're asking people to pay a lot more. Whether you want to say that when we look at the cost recovery ratio, that's one way of looking at it, but another way of looking at it is whether people can afford this. And one aspect of it is a negative aspect is people can't afford it. The other aspect is the decrease in mobility that may be happening over time, and that hurts us all economically, no matter who you are, no matter whether you're on the system, whether you're on the bridges or tunnels. Decreased mobility in the region hurts us economically. The more we increase the fares, the harder, the less people will ride. That's just that's the way things will be. I think we need to look at, not just the board, but the politicians, the elected officials, need to look at who benefits from transit and who should be paying. And I think we need to look at that. There's been analysis done. There's a 1996 report from the Transit Cooperative Research Program that gives an in-depth analysis of mobility access and how that affects a region and how that drives the economic the economics of a region. And we know New York, far more than any other city in this country, depends on the mobility, depends on the transit system in a way that's like nothing else in the country. And I think that has to be recognized, and the rider should not shoulder the burden to this degree. Therefore, the PCAC is going to shortly come out with a report not showing the MTA's particular impact, but how we should better look at that. That only goes to the CBC's new way of looking at cost recovery, and I think that's wrong-headed and backward. Some suggestions, I think, was made by Mark Epstein from the Long Island Commuters Council regarding some small changes, I think, in fares to make them better. I think Andrew alluded to them. One would be changing the family fare, raising the age from 11 to possibly 16 or at least 13 bar mitzvah age, so that children traveling with their parents on off-peak periods could come along, so we'll be attracting people away from their automobiles during off-peak. Because as expensive as parking is, I had a conversation with some board members, there is cheap parking in Manhattan. And especially for off-peak, maybe not for events, but I mean by relatively inexpensive. So I think we need to get people out of their cars. With the increase in the fares, we need to see some of that. And I would propose that if we can't do it now, that we look to do it shortly in the future. I don't think there'd be a very big impact on the fares, on our revenue, if we raise the age from 11 to, say, 15. In conclusion, I'd like to say that I think all of you received a letter I wrote to the governor. It expresses my dismay at the current situation, at how our region's transit reliant, and how we need new solutions to funding the MTA. And that may include equalization of tolls. I mean, certainly Staten Island is penalized when you generally look at the region, because I live in a place where I could get to Manhattan if I drive without paying a toll. That should probably change, because I know the traffic around me is pretty bad. I live near the Queensboro Bridge. So I wish all of you would take a look at this letter I wrote to the governor, and we're going to send it around to the legislature and try to get a discussion going to better fund the MTA and not constantly look at the rider for an increasing amount and hurt the rider as well as any even the non-rider, everybody in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 points to make. We all know there's no free ride, and we all know that our rider has to pay some fair share of the total cost. I agree with all of the commissioners who spoke before me. Our riders are paying far more than they should. That has to be resolved, and this discussion that we're having has to be carried to Albany in order to resolve it. My second point, my county exec, Ed Diana from Orange, and Carl's county exec, Scott Vanderhoff from Rockland, have spoken quite passionately to us and to the public in the hearings, addressing the issue of the fact that our counties are way underserved by transit. Their suggestion is that we pay a lower fare. MTA's own analyses demonstrate that Orange and Rockland counties pay far more than we get in transit. It's a similar situation to Staten Island, and we also have to pay to get over a bridge. There's no other way for us to get here. However, I disagree with their strategy. Changing our fare structure to not be comparable to the others excuses the fact that we have less service, but it doesn't correct it. Since Sandy, our service has been even more detrimental to us because through no fault of the hard work that our transit workers have put in, our service is still not fully restored. The only way to justify an inequity is to see that every county receives service comparable to the money that's paid. Therefore, I will vote in favor of this budget. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Susan just said, and also with Alan Capelli, that the thing is not equitable with all the participants in it. And I think we all know where the problem is, and the problem is where that our funding is coming from. And I think we should put together a committee to go to Albany and a few other sources that we know of where the government is supposed to be helping us out. And we keep blaming each other and going back and forth, but our hands are tied as a board, and we have this is our only recourse to balance our budget. And I think we're being left out in the cold, and I think if we could put a whole group of people together to stay on Albany and to really lobby them and try to get them to come up with the money like they used to, I think it'd be better off than us bickering amongst ourselves and complaining about the inequities between the different counties and whatnot, and who should pay more or less or with each ride and whatnot, and get down to even before I was on the board here, where the government, the state especially, was helping fund us. And once we lost our taxes on real estate, they never came back to help us. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, I endorse all of the thoughts that have been put forward so eloquently by my fellow commissioners. While maybe not adding a critical new element to that discussion, I would like to raise the fact that while our revenue target is 7.5%, that the increase on an actual basis for riders ranges, in the case of Metro North riders, from 7 to over 10%. This is distressing in a stressed economy, and it is getting away from theory and into sort of reality when we put it on that basis. Reading the Metro North budget, we have to applaud the approach that the railroad takes in terms of growing ridership, cost controls, and I believe that that is something which is probably generally observed throughout the agency, more successfully in some parts than others for various reasons. That being said, in this wonderful railroad, we have crossed a milestone at this juncture with the price of a commuter ticket in one of our outlying stations now reaching $500 a month. That means that for a commuting couple who parks locally, gets on the train, and then goes to a job that requires the use of transit in the city, the cost for them to get to work will exceed $15,000 a year. That's just unacceptable. And I think that signals, to me at least, as a commuter representative, that the system is utterly broken. That the lifeline to this region and its economic health is unsoundly financed, and it is unsustainable. As has been stated, and I'll conclude with this, we really need to rethink both the capital funding, the growth strategies, the fare structures for the commuter rails, and capital expenditures. But we've got to do something that is, I would say, moving into the area of revolutionary in order to stop this from going on ad infinitum.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the chairman for his thoughtful introductory comments. The MTA system is a fundamental component of our New York City economy and therefore the nation's, and that's an especially important consideration given our increased costs from the recent storm. I support much of my colleagues' points and will support the balanced package, although in some components a little reluctantly, but I'll support the balanced package. I have two comments on two of the features and a suggestion. The first is I support the comment of Ira's on the family fare expansion. I think families are being hit hard by a lot of different things, including the economy and our fare hikes, and I think having families have the family fare discount to children under 16, which is, I think, the driving age, which is a more possibly relevant factor than the one you mentioned. But
I support that.
Might be appropriate, and it's the least we can do to help encourage using the trains for family trips to the city. And we've discussed this change, and I understand the chairman's view on it. The second one is the $1 MetroCard fee. I don't like the idea of using our fares to encourage behavior other than riding the trains, but I understand the need for the revenue and as part of the package. I just think that if this $1 fee doesn't lead to the solving of the litter problem, which was one of the main reasons this was apparently proposed and apparently adopted several years ago, I think we should consider installing disposal containers at the places that need them with slots. That might help. And I note that some speakers at the hearings opposed it for financial hardship, and I hear that. But then we're having the discount apply at a lower amount. So if they use the MetroCards, that's very helpful to those people in financial hardship position. And also, as the chairman has very successfully explained to me, in sidebar, the ability to avoid paying that surcharge is very widespread, and the surcharge should be imposed on very few people because of that. It's very easy to avoid. So as part of a balanced package, I see we need to meet our revenue needs, and I'll support it, and also point out that that dollar fee is temporary given the new technology that's coming down the pike for fares. And as a board member, I look forward to discussions, hopefully beginning next year, on the relationship among the state, the MTA region's residents, and the users of our system, so we can analyze in a more comprehensive manner the availability of monies to help fund our system. I look forward to starting that next year as opposed to waiting to 15 when supposedly the next round of these will take place. Thank you very much.
I have 2 points. And one, just going to follow what Commissioner Ballin just said. I don't think it's time to study. In 2008, there was a study. In 2009, there was a study. Citizens Budget Commission has done a study every single year. I don't think there is an issue that has not been studied by 2, if not 3 governors, lieutenant governors, the legislature. It's time to act. It's the political will to act. There is not a topic or a fund that has not been studied ad nauseum over the last 4 or 5 years. So as Commissioner Pally said, in 2008, we knew this was coming. They chose not to act. In 2009, we knew it was coming. They chose not to act. And for the last 3 years. So I do appreciate we should continue the discussion, but it's time to act. It's not necessarily time to study. My second point actually is not about the fares. I think we sometimes get focused on the fares in this conversation, and what I haven't heard mentioned is we are passing the budget. The budget does include, and I know all of us have spent a lot of time over the last several years, and certainly over the last year, focused on cost-cutting measures, new ideas to bring down cost, and I just want to point that out. The real estate actions that we've done over the last several years, I think the board presidents, I think the staff at the MTA, Bob Ferran, and the chairman, Chairman Loda, really has a lot to say about that. And when we forget that and we talk about the fare increase and we forget about the real cost savings that the leadership of the MTA has focused on over the last year, and for that, I think it's worth pointing out that we're not just passing this budget doing what we need to do by raising the fares, but we've also passed a budget that has reduced costs and tried new things and has gone a really long way to reducing our expenses.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Merdler.
Mr. Chairman, I think the conclusion is inescapable that the level of frustration among the members of this board is palpable. Nobody likes to increase fares. Nobody likes to increase taxes. And yet, government seems to lack a will to find an alternative or to even seek it short of appointing committees to do studies. Studies, as Commissioner Kay has pointed out, serve no useful purpose when they sit on the shelf after years. Clearly, there must be a search for alternative revenues. Clearly, there has to be a way in which we can fund the kind of services we provide other than on the backs of the ratepayers, the fare payers, and the workers in their contracts. And therefore, I would suggest to you and suggest to those politicians who really have a will to achieve that we look at the possibility of lowering the fares and providing for a surcharge on the income tax at various upper brackets to cover the cost. That is a way in which perhaps we can provide it. And yes, that tax would hit me, and damn it, it's a good idea. Seems to me as well that we ought to start collecting monies that are due us in fairness. The public is entitled to paratransit service. The disabled need it. The disabled are absolutely entitled to it. But this agency is paying $300 million this year for what services are provided under an unfunded mandate and under a 1993 contract that to me makes no sense. That's something we ought to look at. We ought to get that money. That $300 million would be a huge chunk of the $450 million we're spending. And lastly, and this is not going to be happy for anyone, and I don't mind the third rail of politics, it's time we looked at the city bridges. It's time we looked at whether or not there ought to be equalization, not just for people in Staten Island who have to pay potentially $15 million, $15, and to some of them it is $15 million. But it's time we looked at revenues that are unpopular but can get the job done. And I thank you. One last comment. And that is, while I have not always agreed with the chair, I do believe he merits the thanks of this board and of the public at large for the efforts he has made to control taxes, costs, and to provide service. And I thank him.
Thank you, Mr. Merdler. Are there any further comments? Yes.
Can I just make a point of clarification? When I called for discussions beginning in 13 as a board member, what I was doing is not suggesting more study. I was suggesting that I would volunteer to be on that to try and get it done. All right? So I don't need to be a straw man in this. Thanks.
Thank you. Before we have the vote, I'll have a few comments. I was going to say I agree with everyone's comments, but I have to think about that income tax raise a little more. Be that as it may, 13 months ago when I joined the MTA, one of the things I talked about was acknowledging that the paradigm in which both our operating budget and our capital budget was put together was not working. It was not perfect. And one of the things that I said we needed to do is we needed to continue to be efficient, and we needed to continue to have cost cutting. And I said something at that very first meeting about changing the image of the MTA. Changing the image of the MTA, I think, is extremely important. We are not the fat, profligate, out-of-control agency that people have tried to make the MTA out to be. We are an agency that 8.5 million people rely on every single day to get to work, to get to school, to get to doctor's appointments, to be able to get wherever they need to go. And we do it safely, we do it effectively, and I think we do it quite efficiently. We are here today for a fare and toll increase. I wish we weren't here for that, but it was part of the deal that was struck in 2009, and while we've done everything we can to continue to control costs, for example, our discretionary cost in 2012, this year, we're going to spend less than our discretionary costs were in 2011, and very few, if any, governmental organizations can say that. And I agree with all of the comments that everyone's made that our riders pay too much to cover the cost on a per-rider basis. When the United States Department of Transportation puts out its statistics, New York ranks #1 in its riders paying a higher percentage per ride than anyone else in the United States who has a mass transit system. We shouldn't be on top of that list. We should be on the bottom of that list. And we should really together all go to Albany. We need to have a comprehensive community effort to understand how important the MTA is to this economy. We prove that. But let me go back to why our image has changed. Our image has changed because our workers did something no one expected them to do. And what happened in Sandy, they deserve all of the credit. They were able to put this economy back together again. And we ought to take the same spirit that all of our workers, whether it's at the transit authority and the bus company, whether it's at either one of our railroads, at bridges and tunnels or capital construction, take the spirit of all of our workers who love their job so much that they wanted the system to come back. We need to take that same spirit for everybody on this board, as well as all of our elected officials, and go to Albany and go to Washington and go to City Hall and try to get the subsidies necessary so that we don't have another fare increase in 2 years. Now, on another subject, the $1 MetroCard fee that was talked about by one of the public members, as also talked about by Commissioner Ballin, I want to talk a little bit about a lot of the misinformation about that. Anybody who has a card today will not be charged $1. Anybody who has a broken card and needs to replace it will not be charged $1. Anybody who goes to an out-of-service bodega or anywhere else outside of the subway system to buy a card, they will not be charged. Anybody in the commuter system who has a monthly card that also has an attached transit authority card, they will not be charged. We are encouraging everybody to keep their card, and if the card breaks, we'll replace it free of charge. It's only for people who constantly keep buying cards, throwing them out, buying cards, throwing them out. Those are the ones who are going to charge, not because we want to change behavior, but what we really want to do is be able to everybody keep their card and be proud of their Metro card and hold on to it. It's a very important thing to do. And finally, on the family fare discount, we heard all of the messages loud and clear. on looking at the family fares. We heard it at almost all of our public hearings and heard it from many of the board members and some today as well. Right now, the presidents of both of the railroads understand that, and I've asked them, and they've agreed to look at different ways after we implement this plan, sometime in time for the summer, to come up with a new approach, a new way of looking at it as a pilot, so that we can find out ways in which we can encourage more and more families to get out of their cars and come into the city. So we'll be, I'm sure, back in the springtime and into the before the summertime comes, back to talk about what that pilot would be. That being said, we have a motion on the table. It has been seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will consider the changes. By the way, the next is considering the changes on the crossing charges for our bridges and tunnels. It'll be a combination of two votes, one to deal with some administrative issues regarding environmental impact and other studies, and then ultimately the second vote is actual toll increase. There are two staff summaries requiring board action. The first one is a crossing charge package concerning the CEQA review conducted of the proposed crossing charges and the just and reasonable review. Materials relating to these matters, including the environmental assessment, the proposed negative declaration, and the just and reasonable report, were distributed to all board members. By resolution, the board's approval and adoption is sought for: 1, a finding that the proposed increase in the crossing charges will have no significant adverse environmental effect, and 2, the negative declaration, including the authorization of the TBTA president or his designee to execute a negative declaration, and 3, a finding that the proposed increases are just and reasonable under the Federal General Bridge Act. I move this motion. May I have a second? It has been seconded. Is there any discussion on these items? There being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. The second staff summary and resolution is the crossing charges package. Seeks board authorization to adopt a new crossing charge schedule and authorizes the president of TBTA or his designee to take all steps necessary and desirable to establish, implement, and permanently adopt a new crossing charges schedule. I move this resolution. Do I have a second? Item has been seconded. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Capelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me just say how gratified I am to have heard the discussion on the fare increase that took place, and I think it represents a reflective and informed view of the current situation that we're in with respect to fares. And there was a lot of discussion also in that of toll and toll inequities. And I thank my colleagues for their recognition of that. And I will say that this board in the past few years has been very good to the people of Staten Island in terms of the efforts to try to provide some balance. And the current plan speaks in an attempt to do that. It is my intention to vote no on this plan, but not because I'm unhappy with the MTA or the work that you all have done, but for the very reason that I believe that the way that the system is currently situated creates a number of problems and is inadequate for our needs as a transportation agency. I've spoken to the issue of geographic unfairness, which is what we have under the current system. Some members have mentioned, and I am in support of the idea that the current plan that of tolling in this region, and specifically in the city, creates havoc in our neighborhoods, the streets of Brooklyn, the streets of Queens, where people are dashing around on secondary and tertiary streets, driving recklessly, trying to avoid the tolls on the few bridges that are currently tolled in the Bronx as well. And that is caused by a system that is broken and just doesn't work properly. the amount of money that we collect is inadequate for our purposes. I'm in support of having greater subsidies for mass transit. I like when we increase service. What we did this past year was one of the most satisfying aspects of my tenure here is we were able to put things back into it and look at putting service in places where they didn't exist before, and we need to be doing more of that. And I will be a voice, along with many of you, for that effort in the year to come. But we need to identify new areas of revenue to do that. And one of the ways to do that is to look at the other bridges that are in the city and come up with a plan to balance out the geographic inequities, the traffic flow conditions, the financial needs of the system, and create a fiscal plan that is in fact sustainable going forward for both our operating purposes and our capital purposes. There are a number of plans out there, as Commissioner Kay has stated, that have already been looked at. Okay, we discussed the Ravage plan a number of years ago. There were a lot of elements of that made a lot of sense. The mayor had a congestion pricing plan that made a lot of sense. Sam Swartz has a plan that's out there that creates a significant greater amount of money for mass transit than we have today, creates money that can go to sustaining a capital budget, actually fixes the road, has money to fix the roads in the city, is a very thoughtful approach. And while I may not agree with everything, it is an effort that is worthy of serious discussion as as the city and the state deal with, and they must deal with this problem. The kicking the can down the road is coming to an end. I've heard a board here that is expressing frustration with the cards that we've been dealt, and the public at large is experiencing frustration at the ever-escalating hit to the wallets of the working and middle-class people. This way of doing business needs to end. We need leadership from Albany. We need leadership from City Hall. A plan must be developed that deals with these inequities, and we all need to be part of voicing the displeasure with the current situation, and joining with the transit advocates and with the driver advocates, and quite frankly, their interests are in fact mutual here. They're both at the breaking point. In fact, the drivers now, in the city of New York, we're asking to pay a greater proportion of the subsidy for mass transit on an increased basis than we're asking the people who are actually using the service. Things have gotten to the point where they are going to no longer be defensible, and that has to end. So I thank you all for your thoughts. I intend to vote no on this, but it is not a reflection of your concern or your efforts, and certainly not the chair's efforts in this regard. In fact, the chair, I think, has been very sensitive to the county of Richmond, and I would hope that if for some reason he would decide to leave, that a requirement of the next any potential replacement be at least as great a commitment to Richmond County going forward. Just one other point. In closing, my concern with the geographic inequity is not just how it affects Staten Island. Okay, it's how it affects many parts of the region. And so this is not just a Staten Island plea. I am appalled at what it costs people who live in Coney Island to have to go and visit their family in Staten Island, on a regular basis, or as Assemblywoman Maliatak has mentioned before, how it impacts local businesses and people wanting to, it's a crazy system that you can go see, Jerry Seinfeld on Broadway and be able to drive into Manhattan for free, and you got to pay an extra $15 to go see him at the St. George Theater in Staten Island. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a plan that is antiquated, it doesn't work, and it needs to be changed, and I thank you all for listening to me and taking up your time. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Alan. Are there any other comments or questions? There being none, we have a motion on the table that's been seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Mr. Capelli is opposed. That's it. Okay. Before we move on to the budget, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Bill Wheeler for all of his help in connection with both of these resolutions that we've just passed. He and his entire staff have done extraordinary work, and thank you, Bill. Now we move to consider the MTA 2013 budget materials and the 2013 to 2016 financial plan adoption materials. At last month's meeting, MTA CFO Bob Ferran provided a briefing on all of these materials. None of the information that he's provided at that time have changed. I move the adoption of the MTA 2013 consolidated final budget, the four-year financial plan for 2013 to 2016, the individual agency budgets and financial plans, the budget and adoption plan adjustments, and the budget and cash management actions and other staff actions as described on pages 1-1 through 1-5 of the booklet entitled Budget Adoption Materials, and as presented in the agency budget staff summaries contained in the Budget Adoption Materials booklet. I move that motion. Do we have a second? Second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Merdler.
Mr. Chairman, as has been noted by the public in its statements and members of this board, we are adding debt at an ever-increasing pace, year after year, purpose after purpose, and it must stop. Bob Ferran and his colleagues have put together a superbly but delicately balanced budget to try and achieve a result. But it is my intention, subject to whatever facts ultimately develop, to oppose any future budgeting that is based on the backs of budgets of bonding other than refunding bonds. We got to stop it. We're like addicts. Bond after bond that our kids are going to have to pay for in ever-increasing cycle. Time to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merdler. Ira?
Yes, I just want to express my thanks to Bob Ferran and to the chairman and to the staff regarding their efforts to keep expenses in line. Also, all the other things they do, whether it's bond refinancings or the fuel hedgings, to allow us to have such a low reserve in our budget. I mean, the reserve for the MTA is very low, and that allows us also to try and have the lowest possible fare increase, I would hope, over time, and also to provide the increased service we do. So I thank them for all I thank you and Bob Ferran and certainly the staff, and also the staff all the way down to the agencies. I know they've worked hard and cut costs over and over again. As far as bonds go, I just want to speak to that. As someone here said, and I always feel the same way about bonds, bonding is a serious issue, to borrow and borrow. In some ways, we're forced into it. We do want to continue the capital program, as long as there's revenue behind it. And I think that's part of the issue here, is the state coming up with revenue streams to pay back these bonds. And often we see that they do, but then we're told to refinance or extend the bonds out so that those whatever revenue stream was committed to one capital program winds up revenue stream committed to two capital programs. So that a new capital program comes along and we have no money for that capital program. It's a cycle, and that's why we get the public. What do you do with your money? Well, we do with our money is we've spent the money that's been appropriated to the MTA, maybe going out instead of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So as the bonds as the bonds are paid off, lo and behold, again, the legislature says, well, we have no new money for you. you're going to have to borrow again. And that's the cycle. I think I just wanted to be more specific of what that cycle is that Commissioner Merdler was describing. It's not really us. It's our choice would be to cut back the capital program, and I don't think we want to do that. As far as generally in the budget, the Long Island Railroad Communities Council has always had an ongoing issue regarding collection of fares, and I think that's something we're going to have to look at here, because there's issues on the railroad of whether the fares are being collected, whether there's many riders who are actually not buying monthlies, buying 10 trips instead because the fares are being collected. There's issues of people buying fares further in, and how much this is, I'm not sure. I know News 12 actually did a story a few years ago, but I think that's something we're going to have to look at going forward, because we need to collect whatever we can for two reasons. One, we need the money, and two, we don't want passengers saying, well, they can't even collect the fares they have, why are you increasing the fare? And that's what I've been hearing, and I think that's something we're going to have to address. Thank you.
Mr. Ferrer.
Mr. Chairman, I too would like to speak a moment about the budget and congratulate our CFO on his budget team and you for doing some important things to control our budget. Fact of the matter is we're stuck with a lot of the budget choices, and they were choices that were made over the years. Whether we fully like or fully don't like, or lie somewhere in between on the mega projects, that's borrowed money that has to be paid back. I commend our staff for looking for ways to tweak the budget, to refinance at lower rates, to do the kinds of things we needed to do to come up with some extra money to restore some service. Those were important steps for us. And to make that entire process as transparent as anyone could wish for is an extraordinary step for any governmental body, and one that we should all be very, very proud of. Not happy about borrowing a lot of money, and we're probably going to have to borrow money again. God forbid there's another catastrophe like Sandy. There is no alternative. But we can do responsible things, we can do aggressive things and try to recapture funding and take out that debt service as quickly as possible. These are all unhappy choices to some degree or another, but choices we have a responsibility to make. So I intend to vote for this budget.
Thank you. Mr. Bailey.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. I had raised the issue at Finance, but it was unclear. On the subject of borrowing, and a subject near and dear to many of us, the state fees on borrowing, or the vigorish that we pay to operate. We raised the issue in the. I raised the issue recently also with the new Sandy money that we're about to bring up. Have we gotten any guidance from Albany as to how it chooses is going to proceed with us in the coming year? And if
yes, we have. Yes, Mr. Bailey, we have actually a little bit more than guidance. Immediately after the board meeting and after, I believe, an article in the Staten Island Advance, I called the state budget director, Bob Megna, and the state has affirmatively said that they will not be charging us any bond-related fee in connection with any borrowing, if we need to do any borrowing, notes or bonds related to Hurricane Sandy. So that is excluded. As far as new money is concerned, did not get the same response regarding new money, but I held open the possibility for a change when the state does its budget. The money for any new bonds are included in the state budget, and given how tenuous the situation is in Albany with current revenues, they will continue through at least the end of March. But the budget director was upfront and said, look, we'll consider it when we'll see what happens in the January plan is put out by the governor, and then in his budget, and we'll address it at that time for the new money issues. And I fully am very happy to hear what Assemblywoman Maliatakis said about putting forward legislation on that issue. And I appreciate her help and assistance in that.
Senator Golden as well. Yeah.
Nice to see you bipartisan. Yes. Mr. Page.
I would just like to observe on the question of capital and financing versus operating expenses that are necessary to running the system. We are a public agency in the context of public agencies and governments, the state, the city. There is a very deeply established practice in virtually all of those things that for necessary expenses to provide vital service, we will address operating expenses as a current cost, and capital expenses, which are no less vital, in fact, to providing the service than current operations, generally by financing, which is a way of spreading the payment for a given piece of equipment or piece of infrastructure roughly over the useful life of that particular piece of infrastructure. I think that we occasionally fall into a position of somehow seeing debt and our capital need as a wholly separate and different equation than our need for current revenue to pay for current operations. We need both, and I think that a sort of hard distinction between the two is not realistic. We have a problem in terms of the availability of revenue and where we can get it to meet the costs of running the system, and I think we should not sort of confuse ourselves that somehow capital costs are less vital and less our responsibility than operating costs. I see it as one package.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any other comments?
Just need to follow up on Mark Page's comments. I just want
Yes,
a few
sir.
times I actually completely agree with Mark Page on that. I think we have to start looking at it as a total package. Yes. Thank you.
Here comes Mayan apocalypse day. All right. Thank you. There being no further comments, we have a motion on the table that has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. And now I'm happy to turn the floor over to Andrew Saul, Chairman of our Finance Committee, for our Finance Committee report. Andrew?
Okay, Joe. There are 3 MTA headquarter action items this month. The first action item is to obtain MTA and TBTA board approval of an amendment to the 2010-14 capital plan to fund Superstorm Sandy recovery projects and to obtain MTA board authorization to submit the proposal to the MTA Capital Program Review Board for consideration and approval. The 2010-14 capital plan amendment totals $4.755 billion, of which $3.977 billion is for recovery projects in the CPRB covered plan for New York City Transit, Long Island Railroad, Metro North Railroad, MTA Bus, and Capital Construction Company. The remaining $778 million is for recovery projects in the Bridges and Tunnels Capital Plan, which is not subject to CPRB approval. This action item is described in the distributed materials, which are labeled MTA Capital Program - Amendment for Hurricane Sandy Recovery. The second, do you want to do it? Can we take separate? Yeah, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Seconded. Any questions or comments? Yes, Jeff.
One quick comment. As we move forward with this and as the capital program goes forward, I just want to continue to ensure that we're working with whatever reimbursement, insurance, and federal agencies to ensure that we don't start a new project or start scope creeping these capital plans and these capital.
Agreed. Totally agreed. We're working hand in glove to make sure that that happens. Yes, Jim.
Just one quick note that the PCAC, Permanent Citizens Advisory council has, committee, sorry, has signed on to a letter from ESTA to the Senate leadership in Washington to accelerate the approval of these funds in the current legislative session, if possible. And there are a large group of transportation supporters who are engaged or in support of that, and it is our earnest hope that that occurs so that these projects can be successfully undertaken and completed.
Jim, it would be good as well if the committee or council, whatever, PCAC also sends that letter not only to the Senate but also to the House of Representatives, because right now it's important that they also, as a partner in the legislative branch there.
I agree.
Okay. Any further comments? There being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Then the motion carries. Andrew?
The second action item is to obtain MTA and TBTA board authorization approval of necessary documentation to issue new money bond anticipation notes, bands, to generate net proceeds of $2.5 billion for interim financing of work to restore infrastructure damaged by Superstorm Sandy, and to issue bonds to repay these notes. This action item includes 6 separate supplemental resolutions authorizing TRB bonds and bands, DTF bonds and bands, and TBTA bonds and bands. This action authorizes the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, the Vice Chairman, the Chair of the Finance Committee, and the Chief Financial Officer of MTA and the Director of Finance of MTA to take such actions and to execute and deliver such documents as may be necessary or desirable to effectuate this transaction. These resolutions and associated actions are described on pages 32 to 97 in the Board Action Items book distributed for this meeting.
We'll add the next one as well.
Do you want to do it together? Yeah. Okay. The third action item is to approve supplemental resolutions authorizing the issuance of refunding bonds and to approve the delegation of authority to take action to effectuate such refunding transactions, all as described on pages 98 to 157 in the Board Action Items book distributed for this meeting. I move both of these action items.
I'll second it. Do we, any questions or comments? Yes, Andrew.
If by some miracle FEMA or one of our insurance agencies comes up with money prior to the life of these new bonds, are we able to pay them down, or are we stuck with the life of the bond?
We will be able to, it won't be bonds, there'll be notes in such a way that they'll have a very shortened life so that we'll be able to use that to pay them off.
Thanks.
Yes. There being no further questions or comments, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Okay. There are no procurement actions this month. There are 3 real estate action items described on pages 158 to 164 in the Board Action Items book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these real estate items, and I move them.
Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Joe, that concludes the finance report.
Andrew, thank you very much. And now the report of the Transit Committee from its chairman, Mr. Mark LeBeau.
Mr. Chairman, the Transit Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There are 4 procurement actions totaling $3.1 million. There is 1 non-competitive procurement for the MTA New York City Transit in the total amount of $400,000. The committee recommends these, and I move them.
I'll second it. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
There are 3 ratifications, 2 for MTA New York City Transit and 1 for the MTA Capital Construction Company in the total amount of $2.7 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
The item has been seconded. Are there any questions, comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries.
And there are no competitive procurements, and this concludes the Transit Committee report.
Thank you, Mark, very much. I chaired this month's meeting of the Bus Operations Committee. There is one competitive procurement in the amount of $527,000 for MTA New York City Transit. The committee recommended this procurement, and I move it. Second. Item has been seconded. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. There are no non-competitive procurements or ratifications. This concludes the Bus Operations Committee's report. Now to Jim Sedor, who is the chairman of the Metro North Long Island Railroad Committee. Jim?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, the Metro North and Long Island Railroad Committee met this month and reports the following. There is one action item for Metro North Railroad to authorize a public hearing with regard to proposed service changes at the Hudson Line stations in the Bronx and Westchester County to be effective in April 2013. This item is described on page 182 and 183 in the materials distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Item has been seconded. Any questions, comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Then the motion carries.
There are 7 procurement actions in the total amount of $16.32 million. There are 2 non-competitive procurements, one for the Long Island Railroad and one for the Metro North Railroad, in a total amount of $270,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
There are 4 competitive procurements, one for the Long Island Railroad and 3 for the MTA Capital Construction Company, in a total amount of $11.1 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
I'll second it. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
There is one ratification for the MTA Capital Construction Company in the amount of $4.95 million. The committee recommends this ratification, and I move it.
Item has been seconded. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
This concludes the report of the Metro North Long Island Railroad.
Thank you, Jim. The Bridges and Tunnels Committee report next, and it'll be given by Chairman Alan Capelli. Alan?
Chairman Loda, Bridges and Tunnels Committee met this month and report the following. 3 competitive procurements in the total amount of $29.098 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
Item has been seconded. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
There are no non-competitive procurements or ratifications, and this concludes Bridges and Tunnels Committee report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Report of corporate governance. In September, we adopted changes to the board and to the committee meeting schedule, moving from 11 to 8 meetings per year, plus adding 2 chairman's forum meetings. This type of chairman-foreman meeting, which will include participation both of the chairman and all of the agency presidents, is intended to allow for a question and answer period and interaction with the public, which is at traditional board meetings, as you know, does not happen. In addition, the following changes were made to the committees of the board. The Bus Committee and the New York City Transit Committee were merged. The Metro North and Long Island Railroad Committees will again meet separately, except for joint meetings in April and November. The Security Committee was abolished, with security issues to be incorporated into the agendas of the CPOC meetings, as well as each and every one of the operating agency committees. And certain smaller committees will begin to meet on Wednesday mornings before the board meeting, not the Monday before. Having made these changes, the next step was to review the committee memberships, which I have not done in a comprehensive way since I became chairman in January. As a result of this review, I've made a series of changes to committee memberships, essentially adding more members, as I've discussed with many of you on the phone last week. And of course, I also want to reiterate that all members of the board are encouraged to attend all of the committee meetings. I think it's very important in that participation. In addition to that, I am also recommending that the board approve Fernando Ferrer as vice chairman of the MTA, succeeding Andrew Saul, who has served in this capacity since 2006. Andrew has been an exemplary vice chairman of this board, and we thank him, and I thank him personally. for his service and his dedication. Andrew, whose official term expired on June 30th of this year, will remain as chairman of the Finance Committee and as a valued and active member of the board. Freddie Ferrer has been a member of the board since June of 2011. He has a long and distinguished public career, first as a member of City Council from 1982 to 1987, before being elected Bronx Borough President, a position that he held until 2001. In 2005, he became the first Latino to win the Democratic Party or any party's nomination to become the mayor of the city of New York. He now serves as co-chairman and a partner at Mercury, a public strategy firm. He has been a stellar addition to the MTA board, and I look forward to working closely with him in this new role. Therefore, I move that the board approve the appointment of Fernando Ferrer to succeed Andrew Saul as vice chairman of the MTA board. Do I have a second?
Second.
Item has been seconded. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. And now may I have a motion to convene an executive session to discuss a matter relating to collective bargaining pursuant to Section 105(1)(e) of the New York State Public Offices Law. Do I have a second?
Second.
Item has been seconded. All in favor? Aye. We're in executive session. Good morning. I have a brief statement, as you would imagine. Later today, I will be sending a letter to Governor Andrew Cuomo announcing that I'm resigning as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority as of December 31st, 2012. It's been a privilege to serve this governor, and I sincerely appreciate the opportunity that he's given to me to serve both in his administration and to serve the people of the great state of New York. I also want to express my gratitude, as I did at the board meeting, to all of the MTA workforce that worked so hard on behalf of all New Yorkers in bringing our vital transportation system back after Superstorm Sandy. I will be exploring a potential candidacy for the mayor of New York. This will be a life-defining decision and one that I will be seriously considering in the upcoming weeks. I'm thankful for all of the positive support and encouragement that I've been receiving from all corners of the city of New York. However, I will have no further comment on this subject until I make my final decision in early January of 2013. Pete?
Chairman, I wonder if you could express your views on gay marriage, gun control, legalizing marijuana.
Dana, give him the recording from the car, okay?
And whether the next mayor should increase funding to the MTA.
As I said, I'm not going to have any talk about any of this stuff until I make a decision. I'm looking forward to that decision, or what I would call the discernment process that I will be going through. And as I said, I will be announcing that in January. Yes, Andrew?
Joe, when you did communicate with the governor, did you or will you recommend someone to replace you?
It's not my position to recommend anybody to replace me. That's a decision. And first and foremost, as you know, the vice chair will assume upon my resignation the acting chair, and then decisions on interim day-to-day management will be made later.
Joe?
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm fine.
What about Sandy led you to pursue this mayoral option? What about your experience with that?
As I said, I really don't want to talk about anything mayoral. I'd like to talk about MTA-related things. But what I will tell you about Sandy, and I mean this sincerely, the workers of the MTA, from the highest to the lowest level, loved their job so much that they went above and beyond, and they were able to bring back a system faster than anybody thought possible. I don't deserve that credit. They deserve that credit. And I believe that the amount of work that they did is just emblematic of their love for their job and their love for their system, and how much they respect the 8.5 million customers that we have every day in our entire system. And that's one thing that I've always known, but the thing that I learned is that the rest of the world got to know how great all of our transit workers are at New York City Transit, New York City Bus, Long Island Railroad, Metro North, Bridges and Tunnels, as well as Capitol Construction. Thanks. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, what's going to happen should the courts not uphold the payroll tax?
The court will uphold the payroll tax. I'm confident of that. We filed, we are in the appellate division at the Second Department, and we're waiting for the court to decide when the hearings will actually take place.
They don't uphold the tax.
I'm not going to speculate on something as incorrectly hypothetical as that.
Joe, what do you think the MTA is going to do going through yet another position of transition, a time without a permanent chairman, another chairman who hasn't finished a full term? I mean, can an agency with these requirements and challenges actually deal with this much turnover? And did you think about that?
Oh, I absolutely thought about it, and it's bittersweet, my decision to send this letter later on today to the governor. But I will tell you in the short time that I've here, what I have found in the management structure that's here, if you give them the opportunity to make decisions, if you give them the opportunity to expand their capacity to make decisions, they make the right decision all the time. They don't need to be directed and told what to do. Their heart is in the right place. It's all about the customer. It's all about our 8.5 million customers, and that's the direction that they go in. I believe, in the interim period of time that Freddie Ferrer is the acting chairman, he understands that. It was his style when he was borough president, and I believe that one of the things that I've said to members of the board, and it's really important, and from a purely a management point of view, is from where I sit, I shouldn't necessarily be doing the rowing that's necessary to get the job done. It's necessary to do the steering. Point them in the right direction, and all of the presidents and everybody who reports to the presidents of each operating agency will get their job done.
How did you decide on the timing, especially issuing the letter today that you're announcing or deciding on the fare raise?
Well, had I returned any of my phone calls last night, which I didn't, I would have corrected the erroneous story that I was resigning on Friday, but I get great joy in seeing a mistake in the papers. It was always, in my mind, always going to be the end of the year.
And the day that you voted to raise fares, do you think that might?
Oh, that's inappropriate, but I know this is somewhat self-serving, but it's a profile in courage.
Something about this basically thankless job of becoming chair of the MTA. Why would you do that? And I think you.
My daughter did what?
Didn't she cut out something from the New York Times of taking a job? That
oh yes. The Honorable Michael Grimbaum had in his front page on A1 of the New York Times.
And then you
a
post
story.
it in your office or something like that?
I do. I have it in my office.
So what does she say now that you're going to probably run for mayor? You talked to her about that?
I have, and my conversations with my daughter are quite private. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Move on to other topics here.
Yeah.
Just one more. Just one.
We may not hear much from you regarding this.
Till January.
Until January.
Yes.
Can you at least explain to us what is your decision-making process that's going to be going on over the next couple of weeks? This is an MTA event here.
This will be the last question I take, and I'll just say, the process is obviously one that involves my family, and what impact this will have. I'll be unemployed through November, if that in fact happens. If not, then I'll have to seek something else to do.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. This is a question related to.
Who's talking? Oh, hey, Esme.
Is it on? I can't tell.
We're going to talk about lobbyists?
I do want to talk about lobbyists because you are the lobbyist in chief. That Washington sees you stepping down from this agency when you just said it needs billions and billions of dollars of hardening costs above and beyond the $5 billion that you need to repair. So what do you what kind of image does this bring to to show to Washington that you are stepping down now?
I will continue to fight through the end of the year to get the supplemental resolution passed in Washington, as will everybody at the MTA. You're asking me what elected officials think about this. I mean, it's going to be a strange thing for them to not understand. But I will tell you that I firmly believe that the lobbying work that's being done by the MTA directly with the members of the House and with the members of the Senate, in conjunction with the lobbyists of the governor in Washington, are doing a tremendous job that we are already paying for their salaries, that there's no reason for us to hire outside gunslingers to get this done. Yes, Jennifer?
A lot of the board members today in voting for the hikes, said that the MTA needs more funding. They talked about congestion pricing, higher taxes for wealthy people. I mean, do you have a position on this?
I actually do. I don't necessarily agree with one of those tax proposals that was thrown out, but I do think, as I said publicly, that we need to have a comprehensive decision being made about how transportation is funded in the metropolitan area. The fact that our riders pay more on a per ride basis than any other rider anywhere in the country, it needs to be done comprehensively, and I look forward to be part of that decision making. We need to have more stable streams of income. Everybody needs not only needs to understand, they do understand what happens when the MTA doesn't operate. When we shut down on Sunday before Superstorm Sandy, a lot of people thought that we were jumping the gun. They changed their mind on Tuesday morning when they saw everything that happened. But what they never expected is how quickly we came back. But we also saw on Wednesday when we weren't up and running, I always love the fact that, we try to not block the box. We blocked the entire borough. There was nothing but cars all over the place. We need to have a comprehensive transportation strategy. That's a mayoral question. That's a mayoral question, which I'll take care of in January.
You said that this was an act of courage to announce the departure today, but looking at all the work that's going on, you talked earlier about wanting to improve the image of the MTA, that you have to strengthen the agency so you can not have a fare increase in 2015, so you can go up to Albany and get all this money that we're talking about. Isn't leaving the MTA, in fact, turning your back on all of these challenges ahead?
The courage issue that I talked about is nowhere near as important as the fact that I said my decision was bittersweet. I never expected this to happen. I never expected this opportunity to arise, but I will use every part of this opportunity to continue to support the MTA in everything that I do for the rest of my life.
So when you said...
That's going to stand on that statement alone.
Because you
All right?
said the end of the year. How long have you been...
That's not the end of my life.
Right.
Okay. Sorry, I hope. There is Mayan apocalypse thing Friday, but we'll worry about that later. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, without discussing your own interest or possible lack of interest in it, how difficult a job do you think it is to be mayor of the city of Newark? How complex, from the viewpoint of an executive, how difficult a job is it?
Rich, as I said, I will talk about anything mayoral later. You know me. You met me when I sat next to the mayor in a prior life. I know how difficult that job is. I also know how challenging that job is, and I also know how important that job is to the lives of all New Yorkers. Anybody have an MTA question? Mr. Mocker.
Mr. Chairman, you're still the chairman for another, what, 10, 11 days. What is the biggest regret that you have that leaving this agency now? What is the piece of unfinished business that needs to be addressed, the biggest one?
It can be answered on multiple different levels. On the operating side, we still are projecting having a fare increase in 2015. I would have liked to have gotten to a point, and I hope whoever succeeds me will get the agency to a point where it's not necessary. 2, on the capital side, we have a capital plan that'll begin in 2015 that has no funding at this time, and it concerns me that I'll be leaving in the middle of what should be a campaign on behalf of the entire MTA system. Those are things that I actually worried about last week. I worried about 6 months ago, and I will worry about later.
On the fare hike, it seems as though sort of external response to this, publicly has not been the same sort of uproar that you might have expected for a fare hike. Do you attribute that to Sandy? Do you attribute that to the 4 proposals you laid out? Why do you think that is?
I think it was the process. There was a community discussion. While many people did not participate in the public hearings, those who did were upfront and straight, and many of them looked at the 4 proposals and understood. I think that you as writers in all of the newspapers and various other entities out there that we all read every day, we're able to understand and engage in that discussion. I think that's important. The editorial boards of the newspapers here in New York, all of them engaged in that process, and that's all part of what I consider transparency. Transparency is a very difficult term to actually define. For me, it's participation, and the only way you get participation is through enhanced communication. And I think that goes a long way to helping in this process. Yes, Siwa.
A number of board members raised the question about the growing debt in the MTA. As you leave, are you concerned that now, especially post-Sandy, there's going to be more borrowing? Are you concerned about the growing debt, which now is at, I think, 2.3 and growing to 2.5 billion a year?
So long as the debt is used to buy and repair capital projects, and so long as the debt is not used to in the operating budget, I will be okay with it. I think that what we need to do in this, this subway system that's 108 years old, these railroad systems that are 150 plus years old, they need to be continued to make safe and secure, and that's done with bonded money. We don't use bonded money to pay for salaries. We don't use bonded money to pay for operating needs. Bond proceeds are used in the capital program. And it's important to understand that. That distinction sometimes got mixed up in that conversation today. We are using the proceeds of bonds to buy assets, not to pay expenses.
Jim, give me the last question.
Reportedly, one of your strengths is your productive relationship with John Samuelson of the Transport Workers Union. There's still no contract, and a linchpin of your budget depends on coming to 3-0 agreement with them. How can you leave with that undone?
Well, as I've said, I never want to negotiate in public, but there have been conversations on the labor front ever since John was just reelected last week. He was, there was room in between while he was running for his reelection to determine the leadership and his renewed leadership there. There have been conversations, and there will continue to be conversations. As far as my leaving, it's left in great hands. The labor staff here at the MTA, led by Anita Miller, they know what they're doing. They've been leading it day to day, and specifically Tom Prendergast as president of the Transit Authority, who will be integrally involved, as he always has been in these negotiations. They're in good hands. The chairman and CEOs come in at the last minute to close it. They're in the middle of working it out. It'll get done.
Thank you all.
Thank you.